Hey everyone, this is James here. Today going to be talking some more about Italian genre film reviews. I have been ejected from my previous filming location due to the baby, so I am filming it in our living room now, where no one is home right now. So today's topic is going to be on Gialli, and I am going to be making another list with Gialli, and I'm going to be talking about, in my opinion, my favorite 20 Giallis with no caveats. And I think that's one interesting thing you see about a lot of the list making, especially on podcasts or other places like that, is a lot is covered in terms of representation, and people may introduce certain rules, like, hey, I only want to talk about each director once or twice or three times, or whatever it is. And, I'm certainly guilty of that too. I've done that many times too. But I think there's a certain value in knowing just like what are the 20 best with absolutely no conditions. So obviously this list is going to vary person to person. I suspect the latter half of this list, probably between 5 and 20, is going to differ a lot depending on who you ask, and that's fine. I think people's tastes are going to be different. And that's just a normal, natural thing. So I suspect there's some where people are going to be like, oh, how could you put that one at number 17? Or that's not even a Giallo. But, people's definition of a Giallo is surprisingly fluid as well. So in making this list, I wanted to kind of make it, and then I wanted to sort of analyze it afterwards, like how many directors are present and how many films by certain directors, like your Dario Argento's, your Lucio Fulci's, are there in here. How many make the top 5, how many make the top 10, how many make the top 20. So those were some of those things that I was just curious to see kind of where my own preferences would lie. Because someone like Dario Argento is definitely one of my favorite filmmakers, so it would be no shock if he was very, very prevalent all over the list. That being said, a lot of his best films or a couple of his best films are not Giallo, and so things like Spirit and Inferno, not Giallo. So they're not going to be making something like this list. Let's get into the list. So going to be starting from number 20. And 20 will be none other than Argento's Bird with the Crystal Plumage. Just a classic of the genre. This, more than any other film, I see being said as like the one to introduce people to Giallo, and I totally get that. It has a lot of the different kind of golden age characteristics and would really define those golden age characteristics of kind of the black glove killer, so much so that people have this very, very narrow definition of Gialli, which I don't necessarily agree with, but you see a ton of that stuff here. It's definitely not my favorite of the Argento films, but it is my favorite of the Animal trilogy. The film looks fantastic. Vittorio Storaro, the composer is Ennio Morricone, and it goes to show you that a lot of this, the success of the Italian film industry during this era, is also due to just the amazing different collaborators and people like that working on these films. So you also have a very good performance by Tony Musante, and the twist at the end is very, very satisfying and well plotted. So it has a lot of different elements that would, come to just really define the next 2 or 3 years of Gialli's too. Next up the list, I have What Have They Done to Your Daughters, Massimo Dallamano. So this, I actually like it more than Solange, so I'm picking this over Solange. And he focuses on very, very different things. He had his background as a cinematographer. He worked with Leone, I think, on up to for a few dollars more, but ended up kind of splitting off and going and doing a pretty good spaghetti western in Bandito, but also working a lot in the Gialli and Poliziotteschi before passing away. And he did some very, very solid films in both of those genres. I think this is definitely one of them, and what I like about it is it combines a lot of what I like about Poliziotteschi with kind of this, a little bit of a heavy-handed social commentary, which is what Solange does too. So Solange is one of those films where, depending on the person, you're going to see people putting that film as high as their top 5 of Gialli. For me personally, it's a little bit below that. I do like the film, but I really like this one. You have the killer in the motorcycle helmet, which just reeks of different menace, and he puts that all to very, very good effect. So I think a really, really solid film. Next up, we have The Red Queen Kills 7 Times, another classic Golden Age Gialli. Always had a soft spot for this film. The Bruno Nicolai score is very, very catchy here. This is just Gialli comfort food for those of us that are big fans of the genre. Just really, really typical of the era. You got Barbara Boucher. You have just kind of your classic cast. This one combines a little bit more of the gothic elements, directed by Emilio Miraglia. Not a huge fan of his other film, The Night Evelyn Returned from the Grave, but I do really, really like The Red Queen Kills Sometimes, getting a little bit of love for it because the score was reused in Immaculate, which I have yet to see. But nonetheless, it's a great score, a great, very, very fun film. Okay, so next up I have a Sergio Martino classic, so the first one from him. So we are at number 17 here, All the Colors of the Dark. This one has such a rich atmosphere. It's definitely the best cult Giallo film in terms of just, there is a cult here. It's basically him doing Rosemary's Baby. Probably a top 2 or 3 Gialli score, which is saying something because the scores are absolutely loaded here. Bruno Nicolai does this one. The only complaints I really have with this is it's not necessarily a fun watch, for me at least. A lot of it is just watching Edwidge Fenech get tortured repeatedly, and I don't think it quite concludes as satisfyingly as a couple of the other kind of Gastaldi-Martino collaborations. So just some minor knocks there. I do like the film quite a bit, though. Okay, so number 16, we have Stagefright from 1987, so moving well outside of the Golden Age into something that people have repeatedly debated if it's Gialli or not. I'm using a looser definition. I don't want to get too much into semantics, but I'm considering it a Gialli. It makes the Troy Holworth books as a Gialli, so I'm counting it here. This is one of those films that, might feel a little slighter and maybe not as significant as some of the other films talked about here. Nonetheless, I think this is one that really, really lingers in the memory, and the kind of central image of the film of the guy in an owl mask just hunting and stalking people down in this great set, I think it's something that is very, very unforgettable. And I think this is definitely one of the Gialli that is like going to just really, really linger in the memory of someone. So I think there's something to be said for that. I think this is definitely one of those Giallis that's probably going to be one of the top 5, top 10 most seen Giallis by someone that's a big fan of the genre like myself. Very, very 80s, so it's pretty different from a lot of the 70 films that we've all talked about, but I think it's a very, very enjoyable film, and one that I have a great time watching and just kind of brings a smile to my face thinking about. Okay, next up we have another one that, the hardcores might not consider to be a Giallo either, and that is Short Night of Glass Dolls, directed by the very unsung Aldo Lato. John Sorrell is in here, and he does a really good job, just kind of with kind of the handsome lead, sort of the George Hilton type here. And so we just, the central plot of the film is basically like we have this guy that's been paralyzed, and we see what's kind of going on while he's flashing back in his mind, and we're just slowly learning the plot that way. It's a really, really ingenious way to go. It ends in a really, really great, very exciting fashion, a very, very suspenseful film. It kind of captures a lot of the paranoia. It's set in Eastern Europe, I believe, if I'm recalling correctly. Just a really, really well done film. Who Saw Her Die almost made this list too. I think it was one of those that was just outside the list, like 22 or something like that. So Aldo Lato, almost 2 films in this film. Really a very, very good director during this era. He directed also Late Night Trains, which is a good kind of Last House on the Left exploitation rip. I think it's much better than Last House on the Left, but that's my personal opinion. Next up, we got Luigi Bozzoni's The Fifth Chord. I'm hit or miss on a lot of the Bozzoni work, but Fifth Chord is so beautiful, and it has a good Franco Nero performance, which I think, for me at least, allows it to hold my attention a little bit more. This might be the most visually handsome of all of the different Gialli here. Cinematography also done by the great Vittorio Storaro, so really, really good film. Fifth Chord, classic Golden Age kind of plot, but it's very, very entertaining and in kind of that Golden Age way, but the visuals just pop. In a way, I remember the blinds and certain images of that film just linger and linger and linger. So really, really great film there. Next up, I have Bay of Blood. So this is, let's see, what are we on? I think it's number 13. So Bay of Blood, and Bava is just the best at doing something out of nothing. He's not necessarily a very narratively gifted director, neither is Argento for the record, but he could just do a lot of stuff with kind of a shoestring budget, which is something that Argento doesn't have to do. It's certainly not in this era of his career with his film producer dad and whatnot. So it's amazing what Bava can do with very, very little. A lot of these, the different kills and things like that were repeated in Friday the 13th series. So definitely one of those Giallis that falls into the very, very slasher category. And for me, at least, this film has really grown in my estimations, just because I just watch it and I just appreciate all the different craftsmanship that goes into this to the film and all the different kills and things like that. It's just very, very creatively inspired, and hearing how Bava is like creating the forest out of nothing with just waving a bunch of like branches around. It's great. Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, it shows the kind of the power of ingenuity in filmmaking, trumping just needing a huge budget or something like that. So just one of the most gifted in terms of visual imagination is Bava. Okay, next up I have Vice. Your Vice is a locked room, and only I have the key. This is in some ways kind of the reverse of All the Colors of the Dark. It starts with a lot of misery, especially with the Luigi Pistilli character and the Anita Strindenberg as well. But it builds and builds and builds, and the third act is one of my favorite in Gialli's. It also has a more kind of fun role for Edwidge Fenwick, who Sergio Martino had previously been terrorizing in the Strange Vice of Mrs. Wardh and All the Colors of the Dark. So here she gets to come in the second act, play, maybe a little bit more of a supporting role, or maybe the third lead would probably be more accurate, but more of a fun time that she's having rather than just being terrified out of her mind the entire time. So great central performances by Anita Strindberg and Pistilli. My favorite of kind of the Black Cat riffs. Very, very creative stuff done by Gastaldi and Martino, the Martino brothers. Okay, that also a great Nicolai score. A little bit more on the classical piano end of things, but nonetheless very good. Number 11, I have Dario Argento's opera. This is one where I think the high notes are just about as good as anything ever done in this genre. It's a personal favorite of mine, super ambitious. Not everything works. I'm not a huge fan of the ending and things like that, and it can be wildly uneven, but there's some stuff that is just incredibly inspired, and Argento is someone that has incredible visual imagination, but is also working with a budget past the time when the Italian film industry is well past its peak. So it's all put to good use. There's an incredible set piece with the birds flying around. It's just classic Madman Argento. Love it. Really, really great film. Easily could have been top 10, but for me at least, just sitting right outside of that. Number 10, I have House with the Laughing Windows, so just outside the Golden Age, 1976, Pupi Avati. Really strong atmosphere. Love the rural setting here. Strong score, strong performances, and definitely one of those Giallos that it's like, if you know, you know. Most Giallo fans do know and are fans of this. I think there's an upcoming Blu-ray release coming soon. Just about all of these other films have that, so it's nice to see this one finally kind of getting its due for restoration. I think it'll look great. Yeah, I love that setting. It kind of in, I think it's supposed to be in southern Italy. Regardless, it's kind of further south than is usual, or more rural, I should say. Yeah, so kind of a low-key cast, but everyone does their job very well. So yeah, really good film. Number 9, I have The Strange Vice of Mrs. Wardh. For me, at least, this might be one of my favorite. This might be my favorite of the Golden Age Giallos. It's just a really, really great time. It's a great Edwidge Fenwick performance. It's also a really good use of Ivan Rassimov. Just a lot of the stuff that we really like of Sergio Martino. Does a great job of combining that earlier area of Giallo. So that's not going to be covered too much on this list, but a little bit more on the jet set, so sweet, so perverse type stuff, combined with kind of the Argento influence that was coming with Bird with the Crystal Plumage. Okay, and I just realized I made an error. I realized I hadn't listed Your Vice as a locked room, and only I have the key twice. Just a couple spots from each other, so that's my mistake, which means Who Saw Her Die is back at number 20. So another great Golden Age Giallo. George Lazenby is in this. I think it's Anita Strindberg in this as well. But yeah, set in Venice, basically kind of the Don't Look Now of Giallos. In my opinion, more fun. If you give me the option of the Giallo version, so All the Colors of the Dark or Rosemary's Baby, I'm picking All the Colors of the Dark. If you give me the option of Who Saw Her Die or Don't Look Now, I'm picking Who Saw Her Die most of the time. So the Giallo versions are just, they're a little sleazier. They're more fun, in my opinion. They have great scores, and the craftsmanship is very good, even if they're not necessarily a Hollywood prestige drama in the way that those other ones are. Okay, so we are going back up. So let me see where exactly we are on the list. So we're actually going to be number 7 now. So sorry, the ordering got all screwed up due to my mistake there. So I have New York Ripper. This is another one of those films that it's like, wow, you have New York Ripper all the way at 7? But I actually think this is a really great film. Just as good as the Gates of Hell trilogy. I'd probably rank The Beyond and maybe City of the Living Dead above it. But I think this is a really, really good film, and another one that really, really lingers with you. So a very strong movie, and I mean, who can forget this film? Just the sleaziness, and I think there's more going on in terms of the subtext and things like that than people would usually give credit for. So I really like this film. I think it's definitely worthy. So yeah, putting this in at number 7. Number 6, we have Torso. This is another one, sort of like New York Ripper, as well as Stagefright, that a little bit more of the proto-slasher elements to it. I think the way this is plotted is really clever. It's definitely kind of the most pared down Martino, definitely like less in terms of like convoluted plots and whatnot. And I like it quite a bit. I especially like how it really takes a turn into like heavy Hitchcockian suspense in the last, 40 minutes or so. So definitely one of my favorite Martinos and the highest placing that we're going to have for him on this list. Number 5, I have Don't Torture Duckling. So this is Fulci at his angriest. It's also interesting to see with the Giallo getting super popular the way it was in kind of the early 70s, him just sort of doing something a little different that's angrier but also really, really good. So Don't Torture Duckling, going into southern Italy, great Florinda Balkan. The use of music here is really fantastic. The way that we have kind of the mob scene where Florinda Balkan is basically cornered and we see her just being very beat. So very angry, very, very controversial film at the time, especially with the Catholic Church. So really, really good film. Not necessarily as fun as the Argento films, but I think it's one that's good. And oddly enough, I can watch this, a fair amount. I don't mind watching this film very much. Number 4, we have Blood and Black Lace. And for me, at least, I don't want to count this film just because of its influence. I want to count it because it's really, really good. It's great. It's visually rich. You have a lot of the Bava creating something out of nothing here. It's got an old-timey score. The colors absolutely pop. It's the only film here we have from the 60s, but I think it's a really, really good film. It set the mold for so much, so the influence is hard to deny. Impossible to deny, really, but it's a wonderful film and one that I can definitely watch again and again. For me, at least, it's not quite top 2 or 3 material, but it's a really, really fantastic Giallo and definitely one I've seen the most. And, if I ever just want to watch just kind of a visual treat, then this one's great. Again, Bava not necessarily known for being narratively adept, but he sure can compose some fantastic images and great sets. So, huge thumbs up to Blood and Black Lace. Number 3, I have one film that probably I rate quite a bit higher than other people, but I've always been very, very fond of this film, is The Psychic. For me, at least, this is Fulci kind of combining a lot of stuff that I like. There's a lot of dark visuals and images there. It's not quite as extreme as you would get in the 80s, and it's too bad that something like this was not a huge hit. Stars Jennifer, I'm forgetting her name, but a kind of a model from New York, who's really good in here. You have Johnny Garco here as well, playing the husband, and I find the whole plot to be extremely involved. I love the settings, the different set pieces and things like that, and the paranoia. Jennifer O'Neill, that's her name. And for me, at least, this is just Fulci putting everything together, so I absolutely count this amongst the best Fulci pictures. So the top 2, what else could it be? But we're going back to Mr. Argento. Number 2 for me is Tenebre. This is kind of the as I've said in the past, like the fourth or the fifth exclamation point on kind of the Giallo genre that comes well past the Golden Age and well past when you expect it. Definitely a new kind of setting and kind of this futuristic setting. And it's too bad the Italian industry was not what it was at this point, because it would have been interesting to see how people would riff on this. We really only have the Midnight Ripper that takes kind of the aesthetic of this and uses it. Just because, like, what happened after The Bird with the Crystal Plumage, where we get all these different films, a lot of them not very good, but a lot of them really fantastic, like the ones covered here. So Tenebre, it's kind of has a lot of meta elements. In my opinion, this is not necessarily a beginner level Giallo, although you could definitely enjoy it on kind of the very basic level. I think it's more enjoyable once you know a bit more about Argento, and you have probably seen at least 10, 15 Giallos. And number one, the one that absolutely hooked me, Deep Red. Just an all-timer. The richness of the images. And one thing that Argento was allowed to do that other directors weren't is he worked with just greater resources. So he was able to make films that were a little bit longer. Cut of Deep Red is 2 hours long. And he can kind of play and have bigger sets and things like that. Who knows what kind of director he would have been without those resources, but nonetheless, I'm very glad to see him get them, because what he did with them is just amazing. Love Deep Red, one of my favorite films all time. Great David Hemmings performance, but really it's the images and the visuals that are just absolutely burned in the brine, and the crazy kills and the sadism present, so love it. Okay, so let's see. Let's get into a little bit of statistics. So I wanted to talk a bit about the directors, but also a bit about kind of the Golden Age, how many of the films here. One thing that you'll notice is that a lot of people making the list don't focus too much on the Golden Age as much as I think people should, because I think the Golden Age is really kind of the meat and potatoes of Giallo. Okay, so of the directors, we have Sergio Martino, who has... let's see, how many films does he have on the list? Your Vice of the Locked Room, Strange Vice of Mrs. Wardh, All the Colors of the Dark, and Torso. So he's got 4 different films on the list. Let's see, of those, we have Torso, which is number 6, and then we have Strange Vice of Mrs. Wardh, and then we have Your Vice of the Locked Room, and Only I Have the Key, and All the Colors of the Dark. Okay, so of those, 2 are in the top 10. For Argento, we got Deep Red, Tenebre. We have Opera sitting, let's see, I think because, so Opera also makes the top 10, so he's got 3 in the top 10 and 2 in the top 2, Deep Red and Tenebre. Bird with the Crystal Plumage was at number 19. Fulci, we got 3 different films. 2 of them are actually in the top 5. Those are The Psychic and Don't Torture a Duckling. And we got a 3rd also in the top 10 with New York Ripper. So his films are placed very, very highly as well. Notable about Argento and Fulci is most of the films that they have here are outside of the Golden Age, other than Bird with the Crystal Plumage and Don't Torture a Duckling. Bava, we have 2 of his films here, Bay of Blood and Blood and Black Lace. Blood and Black Lace was at number 4, so that's in the top 5 and the top 10. And Aldo Lado is the other director that has multiple entries here with 2 different films, Who Saw Her Die, sitting at number 20, and Short Night of Glass Dolls. At like 14, or I'd have to recalculate where that lands after the mistake with Your Vice is a Locked Room and Only Have the Key. A title so long that I ended up counting it twice. Okay, within the Golden Age, there are 13 different films in the Giallo Golden Age in the top 20 and 5 in the top 10. So that's interesting, and I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that the most talented directors, people like Fulci and Argento, were still doing Giallis outside of that Golden Age, and some of those films are the best ones created. Things like The Psychic are just outside of it. I counted the Golden Age as 1970 to 1975, so basically Bird with the Crystal Plumage to Deep Red. So Psychic, New York Ripper are outside of it. Tenebre, as well as Opera for Argento are outside of it too. A lot of films outside of the Golden Age from those directors in particular. You also have stuff that's just narrowly outside of it, stuff like House with the Laughing Windows. Not a ton of films from the 80s, just those films from those directors as well as Stagefright. There's many also rans here. Almost Made It, Girl Who Knew Too Much, Killer Must Kill Again. For me at least, it's no caveat, so I just liked films just a little bit more. There's also none from the sort of era between Blood and Black Lace and Bird with the Crystal Plumage. I think it's an undercovered area, but, I would rather watch these films than those films most of the time. So apologies to Libido, apologies to Umberto Lenzi. Spasmo would have probably been the closest to making that list. If it was top 30, maybe it would have stretched in there, but as it is, not quite. Okay, so let me know how this list compares to yours. The 20 best Gialli, no caveats, so no restrictions as far as limiting by director or whatnot. We don't care about representation on the no caveats list. We just want to know what are your favorites, what's the best. Okay, thank you all for tuning in. I will see you all next time. Cheers.